This video is going to deal with a new element that you haven't worked with yet in this project, and it's the BR tag, BR, for a line break. We're going to use it in one place very special here in the Declaration of Independence. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, down to where the signers of the Declaration of Independence can be found. I'll do the same here in the live server window. When you come down to the very bottom of the browser window, you'll see that the list of all the signers are just bumped up against each other in one continuous long line. And that's of course because we have not yet applied any sort of markup to this list of signers. Now we're going to do this with the BR tag, BR. I would encourage you strongly, especially when you come across new element names, come to the MDN website. This is the Mozilla Developer Network, and search here for the BR tag, and you'll find it here, the line break element. That's what it does. It produces a line break. So we want all of those names to be on an individual line, and without using a paragraph element or something like that, then we can use a BR tag. Now there is a caution here about not using the BR tag for any other purpose. We should never try to put additional space between objects on a page just by throwing in an additional BR tag. That's not the purpose of this tag. It is a tag just for making sure that every line of content goes onto its own new line. Now we come down in the explanation at the MDN website in the technical summary area, and it tells us that this is an empty element. So what in the world does that mean? Well, it explains it a little bit right below here, where it says that it must have a start tag and it must not have an ending tag. Now that's true for HTML5. Do be aware that there are other versions of HTML, like the XHTML, and in those you do have to have this tag written in a very special way. It still doesn't have a closing tag, but you just put the closing tag / inside of that opening BR tag. It looks crazy. Notice if you click here on an empty element, you'll see that the BR tag is not the only empty element. Tags like area and base, and there's BR, and so on, the HR for horizontal line. All of these are empty elements, which means that when we type them in, we don't have a matching closing tag. You may see here the meta tag, and we've been using the meta tag in all of our head sections to create a meta tag that puts your name as the author of these files. The meta tag is one of those empty elements which does not require a closing meta tag. I don't know if you've wondered about that yet, but when you use meta, you don't use a closing meta tag, and it's because, along with all of these others, they belong to a group of elements that are called empty elements. In other words, they do not have any associated content. All they're going to do is put something on a page without regard to any sort of content. So, marking up these names in Visual Studio Code using Emmet is going to be very simple and very fast. Let me just show you. I'm going to select the first name and scroll all the way down through the list of names. Make sure that you stop at the very last name. Now, in order to mark these up with Emmet, I'm going to use the Control-Shift-A and open up the abbreviation pane at the top, type BR, but remember, we're going to try to put this tag around all of those items that are in that list, so we need that enumerator at the top, and we press enter, and we can see here. When you look at this, you say, that's not right, because the BR tag, like you see here on 53, is not supposed to have a closing tag because it's an empty element. Now, my point in showing you this method to do this particular piece of markup in the declaration file is to show you that Emmet will let you do things that are wrong. In this case, there's really not a better way of doing it other than just do copy paste for each of these different lines. How are we going to get rid of all of these closing BR tags that don't belong here? Well, it's pretty simple. You just highlight one of them, and we know that we haven't used this tag in this document in any other place, so we can very simply just hold down Control and Shift and L, and that selects all of those closing BR tags, and then we can just press the delete key and they're gone. Notice that we have a bunch of flashing vertical lines. We need to make sure we get out of multi-cursor mode by pressing Escape, and then we come up and see that the BR tag is here at the beginning of these lines, and that's what we want. And we got rid of those others. Control S to save, and when we come back to declaration, we will see that all of these names are now on their own line. It's a very simple process, but understand that there are some elements that do not require a closing matching tag.